Hey everybody, it's Michelle Houghton. Thank you so much for joining me here at Copic in the craft room. I have an adorable new stamp that I have been waiting to get in the mail and also then to play with. And he's not necessarily meant to be a Christmas card, but I'm going to turn him into a Christmas card. So this is a new company that I found. It's called Finders Keepers. Two amazing ladies, generous and kind. And they attended one of my Copic college workshops. And they shared about their company that they are doing. It's a paper crafting company. And they told me that they have a few stamps and they're working on more. And they offered to send me one if I had one that I liked. And so I looked online and I said, oh, I must have the hedgehog. So I got this adorable hedgehog and I decided to stamp him. This is a Memento ink and it's one of the kind of just barely kind of sepia tone ones. And so now I can do a little no line coloring with him because he's going to be mostly brown. So I've started with an E50 and I'm basing his body. So I started with just the body portion and then I'm adding some E53, and you're going to notice even with just the E53 those lines almost disappear that are there around his arm and around his ears. I'm adding shading inside the ears, and kind of all I'm really trying to do is make him appear a little more round versus a flat two-dimensional image. So because he's round, we're going to have shading going back around both sides because it curves away from us. And I'm flicking in toward the center so it kind of softens as I go. And then I'm adding some E55 into those darkest areas. So around his kind of the bottom edge of his tummy, down a little bit heavier on the left side of his body, just to give a little more interest, kind of under the arm on the right side, and again the left side on both legs. So he gives that appearance of being a little more round. So E53 is next because I'm going back to blend. So I kind of hit reverse through my markers and I'm going to soften that edge where the E55 ends. And it might come out a little further, and then the E50 is last just on his body portion. So I'm going to color that up. Now you're going to notice obviously his face features are with black because the stamp actually comes with those face features separate, so you can do some different things with his face. I was able to stamp the body and his quills first with the sepia tone and then do his face with a black ink. So it was really easy. I didn't have to go over my lines with black. I just stamped it in a separate color. So I've got an E31 that I added first for his quills, and I just filled those in. I left the edges rough, and then I'm coming in and I'm hitting mostly the lines that the artist gave me for these little quills to add that detail. So I'm going right over it with an E33, and notice I'm using the very tip of my marker and I flicked from the inside like toward his body and flicked out away. So it lifts up, and so they have a little point at the end, at the outside end. And then I used E35 just to kind of add a little bit of darkness to each of those quills. So I literally went in and hit each of those quills right on the center edge. Then I decided I want him to be a Christmas hedgehog. So he is going to get a Santa hat. So I'm using a piece of paper and I'm just kind of lining it up against his head, and I'm shaping a twisty, curvy Santa hat. And I realized that's not going to fit on a card. So I try again. And this is why I'm doing this in pencil and on a piece of paper that I can erase, or I can just start over. And I get this nice curved shape that I think will pretty much work on a card base. And that's the goal, but I wanted it to be more of kind of a fun, wavy hat. Then I'm going to go over my lines with a multi-liner, Copic multi-liner, and that way I know it's not going to bleed when my Copics hit it. Now, this is where I have trouble inking an image. I always end up with one spot where I can't get the lines nice and smooth. I know that my reds that I'm going to use on his hat are going to get really dark, and so if I can keep the dark right in that area, it's probably not going to show up too much. If I wanted to, I can make the whole thing look a little more sketchy, but I'm not going to worry about it this time. This is just for fun. So C1 is going to, with some little squiggles, is going to add some detail onto both the fur trim and the pom-pom. And then with my reds, I'm going to start with my darkest. A lot of times with reds, this actually ends up working a little better because it adds less ink to my paper and has less chance of bleeding. So I've got E59. That's going to be my deepest, darkest red. And I'm starting with that left edge in particular and hitting that. R29 is next. Now notice I start on top of the R59 and I pull that out. So this is where that blending happens when I go from dark to light. The R29 is also going to go to the far right edge because remember this is a cylinder. It's a long tube. So we need to curve away in both directions. Little bit of E59 to kind of continue that out. And then R24 is next. Now this is almost going to fill in that hat. Again, I start on the darker color, so the R29 in this case, and pull out into the lighter area or the white area. And then R21 is the last. Now notice this is a bigger gap between those two colors. I'm going to actually work this pretty hard to get some blending happening. But I do go back a lot of times with my R24 and actually cover that area when it's really wet. So it stays lighter because it has the R21 underneath, but it's going to kind of smooth it out for me. So I've got this hat, fussy cut, which I know you always love to watch me fussy cut because I'm kind of all over the place, but I am going to fussy cut this out and fit this onto my hedgehog head and onto a card. I kept the card super simple. I really just layered 2 pieces of pattern paper and tucked him in on top, and I did add some sparkle. I needed some sparkle on the fur and the pom-pom, so he gets a little sparkle. But I love how this little guy turned out, and he has so much potential because I could add a hat for any season, and really just for a hello, how you doing, thank you, birthday, congratulations, anything. He would work for just about anything, and he's so happy, and he comes with these different little faces, and you can add those. So the last thing I'm going to do before I add him on top of my card is a little tiny shadow underneath so he looks like he's actually attached. I use some C1, soften the edges, and a little bit, a tiny bit of C3 right in the center, and then I blend those and soften the edges with colorless blender. And this is how this little guy is going to look. See how cute is he? So I just want to say thank you again to my friends at Finders Keepers for letting me play around with this little hedgehog friend. He is adorable, and you guys keep working on stamps because I want to see more, and I know people are going to want to see more of your beautiful stamps. But they have wonderful journaling supplies and scrapbooking supplies, so it's worth giving them a peek. Thank you so much for stopping by when you have a chance. If you haven't seen it yet, I have all my dates out, or most of my dates out, for Copic colleges of 2019. Check them out at my blog, scrapweaver.com. In the meantime, I hope you have a very happy, colorful day.